For 3 months, I did not speak a single word, not one. And the hardest part was not the silence itself. The hardest part was that every single day I could feel the words sitting right there inside my chest, and I could not get them out. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this story. I was not a quiet person. I was never someone who struggled to find words, but after one afternoon in late autumn, I became someone who could not say anything at all. And I spent a long time believing that version of me was the only version left. I was wrong, but it took an Englishman I barely knew to help me find out. I grew up in a small Amish community in rural Ohio, the fourth of 7 children. Our days were shaped by prayer and purpose. We woke before the sun, we worked hard, we ate together, we laughed together. We carried each other through difficulty without needing to say very much, because in our community, love was something you showed with your hands and your presence, not just your words. But words still mattered to me. They always did. I loved conversation the way some people love music. I loved asking questions and hearing stories. I loved sitting on the porch with my mother in the evening and just talking about the day, about nothing, about everything. That was who I was. That was the life I lived before everything changed. I was 23 years old when the trauma happened. I am not going to describe every detail of that afternoon because some things do not need to be laid out completely to be understood. What I will tell you is this: I witnessed something I was never meant to see. Something involving people I loved. Something that shattered the sense of safety I had carried my entire life. And in the moments immediately after, I remember standing completely still, wanting to scream, wanting to cry, wanting to say something and finding nothing, absolutely nothing. It was as if the part of me that knew how to speak had simply shut itself down. And when I opened my mouth later that night, no sound came out. I thought it would pass by morning. It did not pass. It did not pass for weeks. At first, my family treated it as grief. They gave me space. They prayed for me. My mother would sit beside me and hold my hand and say that when I was ready, the words would come back. I believed her in the beginning. But as the days turned into weeks, something shifted in how people looked at me. My younger sisters started speaking to me differently, softer, more careful, like I had become fragile. My father grew quiet in a different way around me, not the peaceful quiet of our evenings, but the uncomfortable quiet of a man who did not know what to do. And the community, the people I had known my entire life, started misunderstanding my silence in ways I had no way to correct. Some people thought I was angry. They assumed my silence meant I was holding something against them, refusing to communicate out of pride or bitterness. Others thought I was grieving in a way that would resolve on its own if they just left me alone. A few said nothing at all, which was somehow worse than the wrong assumptions. I was still inside myself, thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same feelings, wanting desperately to connect, but every time I tried to speak, something would close up in my chest, my throat would tighten, my heart would race, and the words would dissolve before they ever reached my lips. I started carrying a small notepad everywhere. That became my voice. And while it helped me survive, it was not the same. It was never the same. What nobody understood, what I could not even explain to myself yet, was that my silence was not a choice. It was not stubbornness. It was not depression in the way some might think of it. It was something deeper, something psychological. My mind had connected speaking out loud with that moment of trauma, and every time I tried to use my voice, my body responded as if I was reliving it. The fear was not rational. I knew that. But knowing something is irrational does not make it stop. Nathan came into our community about 6 weeks after the trauma. He was a speech and trauma therapist who had been invited through a program that occasionally brought outside help to Anabaptist communities when resources were limited. He was maybe 40 years old, quiet in his manner, respectful in the way he dressed and carried himself. He did not try to fix me. That is the first thing I want to say about him. He did not walk in with a clipboard and a plan and a timeline. He simply sat across from me the first time we met, folded his hands, and said that we did not have to do anything today except sit together if that was what I needed. And then he actually meant it. He sat with me for nearly 40 minutes without saying much at all, and somehow, for the first time in weeks, I did not feel like a problem that needed solving. We met 3 times a week. I would write things down and he would respond, and he would ask me questions, not about the trauma at first, but about my life before, about what I loved, about what made me laugh, about my mother and my sisters, and the way the community gathered together on summer evenings. He was genuinely curious. And slowly, I started looking forward to those sessions in a way I had not looked forward to anything since before the trauma. There was something about the consistency of his presence that began to feel safe. He never pushed. He never made me feel broken. He simply showed up every time and treated me like someone whose story was worth hearing, even when that story arrived on small squares of notepad paper. About 6 weeks into our sessions, something happened that I was not prepared for. I had written something to him about feeling like I had disappeared, like the person I used to be was gone, and that I was not sure she was ever coming back. He read it slowly, and then he looked up at me and said that he understood that feeling more than I might expect. And he told me quietly that when he was in his late 20s, he had lost his daughter, a sudden illness, 3 days from diagnosis to the end. He told me that after she died, he spent 8 months unable to walk into a hospital without having a full panic response. He told me that the body does not forget trauma the way the mind tries to. He told me that his own healing came slowly, imperfectly, through one person at a time choosing to stay beside him when it would have been easier to look away. He was not comparing our pain. He was telling me that he understood the geography of it, and something in my chest shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but it shifted. That night I cried for the first time since the trauma, not the stunned, dry-eyed numbness I had been living in, but real tears. And when I woke up the following morning, something felt the smallest amount different. Not better, not healed, but slightly less sealed shut. Then came the setback I did not see coming. My father found out that Nathan had shared something personal with me during our sessions. In our community, that kind of emotional openness from an outsider, especially a man toward a woman, is something that raises questions. My father came to me, concerned and gentle but firm, and said that perhaps it was time to reconsider whether these sessions were appropriate. He did not say it to harm me. He said it because he loved me and he was afraid. But in that moment, I felt the floor disappear beneath me. I had finally found something that was slowly, carefully helping me, and now I was watching it be pulled away. I sat in my room that night and I believed, completely and deeply, that I was going to be silent for the rest of my life, that the one thread I had found back to myself was about to be cut. I had no words for the grief of that. I had no words for anything. I want to tell you about what got me through that night because it was not a dramatic moment. It was a letter I had written to myself weeks earlier during one of Nathan's sessions that he had asked me to seal and keep unopened. He had said, "Write something true right now and save it for when you feel like giving up." I opened it that night, and inside, in my own handwriting, were these words: "You are still here. You are still thinking. That means the part of you that matters most has not gone anywhere." I had written that to myself on a day when I had felt the smallest fraction of hope. And that night, when hope felt completely impossible, my past self had somehow known to leave something behind. I went to my father the next morning. I could not speak, but I wrote him the most honest thing I had ever written. I told him that I had spent months disappearing into silence, and that these sessions were the first thing that had made me feel like I might find my way back. I told him I respected his concern. I told him I needed this. He read it twice. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he nodded. He said we would speak to the elders together. And we did. The sessions continued. Slowly, with the trust that had been built and then almost broken and then carefully rebuilt again, I started doing something in our sessions that Nathan had introduced very gently over time: breathing into sound, not words, just sound. A hum, a breath with shape to it. It sounds small. It was enormous. Because every time I made any sound at all, my heart would race and that familiar fear would rise. And Nathan would simply say, "Stay here, you are safe," and I would try to believe him. And then one afternoon, without planning it, without even fully realizing what was happening, I said a word. I said his name. I said Nathan. It came out barely above a whisper. My hand flew to my mouth. He did not move dramatically. He did not cheer or celebrate in a way that might have made me feel exposed. He simply looked at me and said quietly, "There you are." And I wept. Not from sadness, from something that felt like recognition, like finding something I had believed was permanently lost. Healing from that point was still not a straight road. There were days I could speak several sentences and days I could manage only one or two before the fear returned. There were conversations with my family that went better than I expected and some that went worse. There were nights I lay awake and prayed not for my voice to come back, but simply for the courage to try again the next day. Nathan eventually completed his time with our community and moved on to other work. Before he left, I told him in my own voice, fragile and imperfect and genuinely mine, that he had not fixed me. And that was exactly what made the difference. He had not tried to fix me. He had simply stayed beside me long enough that I stopped being afraid of my own silence. That is what I want you to take from this story. Sometimes the people who help us find our voice are not the ones with the perfect words or the perfect plan. They are the ones who sit with us in the quiet and do not flinch. They are the ones who treat our struggle not as a problem to be solved, but as a story worth waiting for. Trauma is real. Silence can be its own kind of survival. And healing does not mean the pain disappears. It means you slowly, courageously choose to keep speaking anyway. I am still in my community. I still love simple conversations and laughing with my sisters and evening prayers and the ordinary beauty of a life built on faith. I lost my voice for 3 months, and when I found it again, it was not the same voice. It was stronger, it was more honest. It was mine in a way it had never been before. If you have ever gone through a season where you could not find the words, where something inside you went quiet in a way that scared you, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me what that felt like. Or tell me about the person who stayed beside you when speaking felt impossible. And if this story touched something in you, please share it with someone today who might need to hear that their silence is not the end of their story. It might be the beginning of the truest one they will ever tell.